Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a well respected doctor and an author from Chicago, USA, Mr. Eugene Lipov. Gene, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate
Uh,
it.
Dr. Lipov is the Chief Medical Officer at Stella Mental Health, and he's an author of a book titled The God Shot. So there you are. So, Gene, before we come to talking about your book, The God Shot, a few questions for you. Your work around trauma is inspired in part by your own family's experiences. How did those early encounters with trauma shape the direction of your medical career?
Well, so let me tell you exactly what that means,
Hmm.
if you don't mind. So my parents, both of my parents, my father and my mother were physicians.
Hmm.
And then unfortunately, my father had severe PTSD from the war, World War II.
Right.
And then he gave that lovely condition to my mother. It's called secondary PTSD, which led to a suicide when I was an intern in surgery.
Hmm.
That derailed my surgical career to anesthesia and then pain. And here we talk today.
Hmm. Okay. And you've been described as a pioneer who challenged conventional thinking about trauma. What were the toughest barriers you faced when introducing a new way of understanding PTSD as an injury rather than a disorder?
Well, let me give you a background on that. So the first time I treated somebody, well, hopefully my claim to fame is that I was able to adopt a pain procedure to treat PTSD. So when you tell somebody, a professional who's been doing it for years, that an
Hmm.
injection on the neck can take away PTSD, a psychiatric condition, people go, What are you talking about? That makes no sense."
Hmm.
So I gave testimony about that in U.S. Congress in 2010,
Hmm.
and they did not really think much of it. They thought I was a little cuckoo in the head.
Hmm.
And I've had a lot of pushback on that from a lot of people.
Hmm.
And I mean, what was the hardest? I think people basically were saying that we don't believe you. I think it's completely
Hmm.
fabricated. It's crazy. But, and I told people in Congress in 2010
Hmm.
that data will prove either way who's right and who's wrong.
Hmm.
And it's been replicated now in a number of military institutions. And there's a big study should be coming out next year,
Hmm.
which is going to be pretty definitive. So, proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's come to your book, The God Shot. Your book begins by asking, what if everything you thought you knew about trauma was wrong? What do you believe people most misunderstand about trauma today?
Well, when we talk about trauma, it's not like physical trauma in the sense of broken arm.
Yeah.
What we're referring to there is psychiatric trauma, meaning you see something horrible happen and then you're scarred the rest of your life. Like seeing my
Hmm.
mother dead on the floor was a very jarring and scarring episode.
Hmm.
But the key point to realize that there is a brain change that occurs following this type of trauma. You can
Hmm.
actually So the term PTSD is very traumatizing and stigmatizing. So
Hmm.
people don't want to be called broken or whatever. In fact, I'm going to be doing a TEDx talk in Mexico, January 15th, about that very topic. But if you think of trauma as real, it's much easier to seek help for real
Hmm.
conditions.
Hmm.
And for example, I was at a large fundraiser for military, and people
Hmm.
in 2025 are still using the term invisible wound. It's only invisible if you have the wrong scanner. If you have the right
Hmm.
scanner, like
Hmm.
functional MRI, PET scan, MEG scan, you can actually see it.
Hmm.
So what we find, we did a survey in 2023,
Hmm.
and we found that if we change the name PTSD to PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, meaning it's biologic, it's real,
Hmm.
it reduces stigma, and we know stigma kills, right? If you don't seek care, you kill yourself, that's death, that's real
Hmm.
death.
Hmm.
And then also it produces misery. And the other thing that's really I'm very big into, ultimately, the God Shot book is a book about hope, that it's possible to get out of PTSD hell.
Hmm. Well said. The term the God shot was apparently coined by the Marines. What does that
That's
name represent to you as the creator of the protocol? And what does it capture about the experience of patients?
well, the way that came about was kind of funny. So I was reading a Marine, and he said one of my buddies had the gut shot
Hmm.
and changed his life. I said,
Hmm.
I've never heard that. He said, well, his life was changed for the better.
Hmm.
So the only entity that can change life is God. So he called the gut shot. I thought,
Hmm.
that's a beautiful term.
Yeah.
Then somehow or other, Playboy magazine got interested in the gut shot,
Hmm.
and they commissioned somebody to go through it.
Hmm.
It was Matt. He wrote a beautiful article about it. It came out in 2016. If you want to read the article, it's on thegotshotbook.com. You can download the article and read it. It's fascinating.
Amazing.
Beautifully done.
Amazing. Amazing. For people hearing about SGB, which is science behind the procedure, uh, for the first time, how would you explain when it is physiologically resetting inside the body?
Sure. In order to explain, if you don't mind, I'd like to explain what
Please,
PTSD,
please. Yeah.
PTSD/PTSI is. I prefer the term PTSI, but we'll use PTSD since it's conventional.
Yeah.
So when somebody has, let's say, sees trauma, horrible, whatever, we don't have to get
Mm.
into the details, two things happen. Number one, norepinephrine secreted, which is brother of adrenaline,
Hmm.
gives you revved up. So think of standing, almost get hit by a bus, you jump in the street, you're
Mm.
hyperventilating, so you're trying to get more oxygen in. You're hypervigilant, you're looking around, make sure you don't get hit by another bus. You
Mm.
can't sleep that day, all of that.
Mm.
If that's all that happens, it goes away, then they're fine. The other thing that happens, if the trauma is severe enough or over enough period of time, it
Mm.
produces NGF, nerve growth factor.
Hmm.
That substance goes from the brain, goes to the stellate ganglion, which is fight and flight nexus in the neck,
Hmm.
and makes sympathetic nerves or fight and flight nerves sprout.
Mm.
So usually, let's say there are four, now there are eight.
Mm.
Each one is producing norepinephrine.
Yeah.
As long as it persists, you're going to have the symptoms of PTSD.
Mm.
That could be 50, 60, 70, 100 years, whatever.
Mm.
So when you do local anesthetic injection in the neck, it does two things. Number one, it reduces norepinephrine 5, 10 minutes. So a lot
Hmm.
of times people take a deep breath, they feel much better. It's a much better experience for them. But
Mm.
number two, it reduces NGF. So as that drops, you're going from 8 nerves down to 4 nerves.
Hmm.
So somebody who had it for 50 years, let's say, which we've done, you
Mm.
do an injection, and that so far it lasted 8 years
Mm.
from one injection that lasts 8 hours. Because
Mm.
the other question people ask, what are you actually injecting? We're
Mm.
injecting bupivacaine. Bupivacaine is a local anesthetic that's used during pregnancy for epidurals. So you
Mm.
know it's a safe drug. It's not a psychiatric drug. It's also a non-abusable drug. If you steal my bupivacaine, pull it in your nose will get
Mm.
numb about it.
Mm. Mm. Well said. Many still believe trauma cannot be healed, only managed. How does the God shot challenge this belief?
Well, they're wrong.
Absolutely.
And the way it challenges the belief is, let me give you an example of a real
Yeah.
person. We can talk
Yeah.
about studies, but I think people respond better to stories than
Correct.
cold statistics. So we took care of a gentleman who was from New York state New York. He was injured in Vietnam when he was 19 years old.
Hmm.
So he came to see me. I did the block on him, one block, and he started crying uncontrollably for 30 minutes. And I said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "I have not felt emotion in 30 years, 50 years,
Hmm.
50, right? 50 years."
Yeah.
And then he was at our fundraisers 3 years later
Mm.
with his children. He said, after the procedure, I've stopped taking psychiatric medications. I don't
Mm.
drink. I
Mm.
feel great. And I was able to reunite with my family. So
Amazing.
all the kids came by and gave me a hug. Thanks for giving me our father back.
Mm.
So my point is, to me, PTSD should not be a lifestyle.
Mm.
It's a medical condition that is diagnosable
Mm.
and treatable. right? Those are the
Mm,
two important things. When
mm,
people say it's managed, what's manageable? Like there was a
correct.
paper written recently that average number of different drugs that are given to the PTSD guys in the VA is about 7.
Mm,
They have a lot of complications. Efficacy is about 40% of
yeah,
conventional therapeutics.
yeah, yeah,
That's not as good.
absolutely. Great response. You also mentioned that treatment brings instant calm for many recipients. What biological processes allow for such rapid transformation?
Well, I don't know about instant.
Okay.
Doctors usually don't use the term instant,
Okay.
rapid. And can we
Hmm.
say rapid or even very rapid?
Okay.
Within 10 minutes, a lot of times people can feel significant change.
Mm, mm,
What happens is when you do the block or numb up the nexus in the neck, stellate ganglion, norepinephrine secretion stops
mm,
like that, right? It takes about 4 or 5 minutes for that to happen.
mm,
The brain substance absorbs norepinephrine, so the levels which are really high
mm,
drop suddenly. So when it drops suddenly,
mm,
you don't feel the anxiety anymore. That's why it's so rapid.
mm,
It's
mm.
not numbing up the nerve. I mean,
Yeah.
numbing up. If anybody has ever had like a nerve block or anything, like a tooth,
Mm,
they do it in about 5 minutes. You can't feel
correct.
the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 That's a good example. Thank you. One of the fascinating themes in your book is that trauma can be contagious. How can one
Right.
person's trauma biologically affect another? And give me an example if you can.
Well, the one of the most extreme examples is my mother.
Hmm.
So my father came back from the war, World War II. He was in a squadron of 10,000 people
Mm,
in dropping bombs on German ships, which they did not like that. So 100 came home. He was pretty good and pretty messed up in the head. So living with him was anxiety producing, right?
mm,
So there is you have to walk around in eggshells. You want to kind of always see what mood is he in today, the up, down. You don't want to make him too upset or too ever because he can get violent.
mm,
And he had propensity to violence to a certain extent. And then, it was always stressful. Being next to him, you feel like there's a tightly wound spring.
mm,
So if you think continuously biologically, we're just talking about biology.
mm,
So if you are around somebody like that, you have to remember human beings have echo neurons or mirror neurons, meaning what
mm.
you're feeling, the other person is feeling also.
Yeah.
You sustain that, the fight and flight system doesn't know any different. It says,
Mm,
I'm anxious, I'm very anxious, I need to be anxious.
mm,
So fight and flight nerves start to grow and they produce norepinephrine.
mm,
Technically, secondary PTSD. So when I talk about it is think of PTSD as STD, sexually
hmm.
transmitted.
Right.
So a lot of times when we treat people with PTSD, especially like military, I try to treat them and the families.
Mm,
Because if we treat the guys, we've seen, the women who still have PTSD, they give it back to the guys. Now the guys feel
mm.
bad about it and they're anxious. And it's like, so
Very
if you
interesting.
treat everybody at once,
Yeah.
what's interesting, we took care of a family like that. And they had a 5-year-old kid, which was misbehaving, bouncing off the
Mm,
walls. We
mm,
treated them. The kid became stable, smooth sailing. And when
mm.
we talk to the kids, and he's like, it's not scary anymore. My
Correct.
my mommy and daddy is not fighting. They're like, calm.
Mm.
I love
Amazing.
that. Because
Amazing.
I was one of those kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to get treated because of that. So I understand it quite well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You also write about how animals experience trauma in ways similar to humans. What have animal studies taught us about invisible injuries?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in visible injuries like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm,
So, actually, if you look at statistics, so quarter of dogs that came back from Iraq,
mm,
military dogs, have something called VPTSD, veterinary PTSD. The symptoms are the same. They
mm-hmm.
can't sleep, the personality changes, if either aggressive or not.
Mm,
And then hypervigilance, always pacing, right? The same
mm,
thing as military people get. So that's been known for years.
mm,
So I had an opportunity to treat a dog.
mm,
It was a companion dog, very lovely animal. Somehow he got away from whatever, got stuck on the truck and got burned. And he had a, I call it Xanax habit. They had to give him a bunch of Xanax
Mm-hmm.
because he was so bouncing off the walls. They were thinking of putting him down because they couldn't
Mm-hmm.
really control. So we did stellate on him. And 10, 20 minutes later, after he woke up from anesthesia, he was calm and he did really very well. The point is, if there is a real condition, it should be diagnosable, right?
Correct.
Scans. It should be reproducible in animals. There is a lot of studies looking at rats
Mm.
PTSD. Let me just tell you how you do experimental PTSD in rats,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you can't really sit them on the couch and ask them questions.
Correct.
So the way they do it, it's a little brutal. So I apologize to the audience
Mm.
about that.
Mm.
So basically, you throw rats in water,
Mm.
and they get tired of swimming. When they're about to drown, so it's like almost waterboarding, you pull them out of the water. So there's an experiment like that done in South Korea.
Mm. Mm.
Half of them got stellate, the other one half didn't. They threw them back in the water.
Mm.
The ones who had the stellate swam out and survived. The ones who
Mm.
didn't drown.
Yeah.
Point being, severe PTSD makes animals, mammals at least, immobilized.
Mm. Wow.
So that's how it's been shown in animals. So there's no debate, it happens.
Mm.
Just people
Mm.
talk
Mm.
about it.
Mm.
Because our thing is like, oh, let's hold a hand and let's talk about it. There's nothing wrong with that. But to me, lower the speed of the engine first, and then psychiatric intervention is much more effective.
Mm. Very well explained. Thank you. What patterns have you observed in how trauma manifests differently in soldiers, civilians, and people recovering from childhood trauma?
No difference. It's the same
No
thing.
difference, though?
No. In fact, well, I mean, there are some
Yeah.
differences
Yeah.
because there was battle, people get flashbacks to their body being blown apart
Mm.
as opposed to being raped as a child.
Mm.
Point, I was actually giving a lecture at the military museum,
Mm-hmm.
and this grizzled veteran from Vietnam said, my military trauma is like the severe, women and the same thing. I said, hold on. So let me understand what you're saying. You're saying your body is being blown up, and I'm sorry, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
But you're saying if a woman is chained to a sink and raped for 10 years, their trauma is less than yours. Is that really a
Mm.
discussion you want to have with me today?
Mm.
Symptoms are the same. The
Mm.
dog symptoms, the military symptoms, the sexual trauma symptoms are the same. They can't
Mm.
sleep,
Yeah.
hypervigilance. The brain will look the same.
Mm.
And will light up. Just the characters change, but the symptomatology is the same.
Mm.
So to me, there's no real
Yeah.
difference.
Okay,
Treatment
thank
is the
you.
same also. So that's
Thank
why
you.
the great thing about what I do, people
Yeah.
come in, they go, I had trauma. You don't have to give me details because
Mm.
reliving it is also
Correct.
traumatizing, right?
Correct. Correct. Well said. Do women and men respond differently to trauma or to the God shot treatment? What has surprised you the most in the feedback from people who once believed they were beyond help?
Okay, so that's three questions in there. Let me give you a couple of different answers. So if a male and a female have the same trauma, let's assume exactly the
Mm.
same trauma,
Mm.
exposed to the same incident, the women develop PTSD twice the rate than men.
Okay.
I believe that's true because their fight and flight system is more
Mm.
reactive.
Mm.
So that's been shown in a number of studies. So
Mm.
I think that's true.
Mm.
Uh, the so your other question was what has been the most surprising things that I
Correct.
found?
Yes.
The part that's kind of been interesting for me is when people, first of all, I've had like number of special forces guys, like tough, you're talking about real, like you're talking about top of the spear,
Mm.
crying like babies. It is pretty interesting. I mean,
Mm.
it's thank God they can let the guard down. And I tell them, leave all the emotions here, we'll wash the floors later.
Mm.
Kind of usually gives it a chuckle.
Mm.
But the thing that's been consistent, which is interesting, is they're able to take a deep breath,
Mm.
like first time in years.
Mm.
I will give you the weirdest one, though. I think that's what you were asking for.
Mm.
And that shows my I've always kind of wanted to write at least a book or a chapter about the tale of two brains.
Mm-hmm.
So two kind of memory we have. We have hippocampus, which remembers day and math, whatever.
Yeah.
There is amygdala, which controls emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So the second patient I ever treated was special forces. He was patrolling Iraq Street,
Mm-hmm.
and a 10-year-old kid was sent to them to explode their squad with a suicide belt. So my patient shoots the child. A
Mm-hmm.
piece of the child hit him. He comes home trying to kill his wife a couple times.
Wow.
Pretty brutal. So anyway, so somehow or other we connect. I do the procedure on him. 10 minutes later, he says, here's what's going on with me, doc. Number
Mm-hmm.
one, I used to be going at 120 miles per hour. Now I go about 20. So I'm cruising. I feel much better.
Yeah.
Two, I remember the incident, but I remember the fact, and it's all black and white, the color, the horror is gone, right? So the whole concept that the amygdala and hippocampus work separately is interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
there's one study that I'd like to tell you about, which kind of explains the
Yeah.
mechanistics.
Mm-hmm.
There was this guy in Philadelphia was doing a study on patients who had hippocampal infarcts. So they had short-term memory loss. So he meets the same person for the first time every hour, right? Something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So they played movies, happy movies,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked him 3 hours later, how do you feel? Really happy. Why? No idea.
Mm-hmm.
Next day, they played him sad movies. How
Mm-hmm.
do you feel? Sad. Why? No idea. I don't remember any movies, nothing. But I feel sad. The point is, amygdala remembers stuff totally separately than hippocampus. So this block, for whatever the reason, deactivates the amygdala and activates the hippocampus.
Mm-hmm.
So the emotional drive and emotional memory
Mm-hmm.
is what's driving it. So if you can deactivate it,
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. That's why, and it's the compliance is 100%. Somebody comes in, they want to block the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to keep taking pills the rest of your days.
Very well explained. Time for two more questions for you. Your
Sure.
work is bold and disrupts long-held psychiatric frameworks. Have you faced resistance from within the medical community, and how do you address it?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, they have definitely been resistance. So, in fact, there was a study that was compromised. We're not going to get into details who did
Yeah.
that, but a
Mm-hmm.
major force in U.S. military was trying to compromise the study of death.
Mm-hmm.
And they published that study, which was really suboptimal, which has been discredited since. But yes, the people have tried to prevent it and saying it's all a hoax or it's a placebo effect, it's
Mm-hmm.
this, this, this. The study that should have been done is almost being done now. So it's amazing. People gave us enough financial capability. The study is being done at NYU using functional MRI, the scanners I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think once that comes out, the debate will be over. We're going to save a lot more lives.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as how or why I was able to resist all that, yeah, some people call me, like in Congress, they called me a crock. That
Mm-hmm.
I did. Really enjoy that.
Okay.
Uh, if my personality is such, if I know I'm right, 1,000 or 1,000,000 people can tell me I'm wrong. It doesn't really matter. And the
Correct.
reason I persisted is because of my mother's death, right?
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like to go through that. I
Mm-hmm.
suffered that before. And people don't know what they're talking about. And ultimately, I'm a clinician. If the patients tell me it's working for them and I see it over time, I believe the patients. If people are too stupid to understand why it works, including me, it took me a while to understand mechanistics,
Yeah.
that's not the patient's fault. They know it's working. And I come back more, it's like, hey, it's worked so good, it's changed my life. My wife tells me I'm really nice. That's not placebo, that's not lies.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Gene. If the world adopted the injury model of trauma tomorrow,
Mhm.
what would change for individuals, for governments, and for healthcare systems?
Well, first of all, less people will die. It's kind of nice.
Mm,
The cost of administering care for psychiatric trauma will drop markedly. So in my study in 2023, I found that if the name, just changing the name, PTSD to PTSI will have three effects. Number one, less stigma. We know stigma prevents people from being care and suicide. No question. Number two, it gives people hope. People get more hope. Hope, nobody has killed themselves when they have hope. Right? Number three, they're going to get more care, medical care.
Yeah.
So if you think about how much money is being spent currently administering current therapeutics, you're looking about $30,000 in the United States per year. And that's being general. I mean, that's being underbowling it without the admissions and all of that stuff. If you can do something for $1,000 or $2,000 and reduce the admissions, each admission is about, of the psychiatric admission, $30,000 to $50,000. I think the savings would be huge. That part is, people don't think about it, but having PTSD increased the chance of heart attack by a factor of 2. That costs a lot of money to treat that.
Correct.
And people age, so we lose people we don't have to lose. It also costs fertility and all the other things, which are very expensive. And besides misery, I mean, the misery of living with infertility, 85% of men have sexual dysfunction. Just sitting on a little blue pill would be helpful. Whatever.
Correct. Wow. And on that note, Gene, I just want to say what a fascinating and insightful conversation this has been with you. I must tell you that you have this amazing ability of being able to explain very difficult topics to my viewers and listeners and to me with incredible amount of clarity and in simple English. Thank you for talking to me about PTSD, PTSI, the God shot, and so many other aspects of trauma that all of us go through all the time in our lives. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.